Hello everyone. In the very first video I made for this channel, that was basically an English version of the cost saving tips that I had made in my wife's channel, in Anand's channel. And there were 6 cost saving tips that I had given for people living in UK, especially people Indians who are coming to UK and London. And one of the tips that I had mentioned in that was, switch your provider, be it an energy provider, broadband provider, mobile provider. Switch your provider almost every year, especially insurance providers. And when you switch every year, you will get a better deal. You will get a lot better deal. In fact, a lot of savings can be made just by switching just the insurance companies and energy providers. Having said that, I didn't go in deep into the reasoning behind why switching energy providers is cheaper. And another thing is, I have been complacent as well. I usually check about every 3 or 4 months. I check my energy consumption versus the energy tariff that I'm on, to see if I can get a cheaper deal anywhere else, if I can reduce my electricity and gas bills if I go to another provider. So first of all, what happened was, out of the blue, I got a call from my provider saying that I've been paying a fixed amount every month in direct debit, and they said that they need to increase my monthly payments by about £20. And I immediately knew that it was the time to change my energy provider, because that means that I'm not on the right tariff. And I knew immediately that I need to do a comparison, which I haven't been doing for the past 3 or 4 months because of lockdown and so many other distractions. So I went online, spent about 20-30 minutes. I built an Excel file specifically for me to compare energy tariffs and to make sure that whatever tariff that I'm getting, I'm able to calculate and verify the accuracy of the tariff that I'm going to pay. So I'll share that Excel file also, and I'll walk you through this. Spent about 20 minutes, and immediately I was able to save about £600 in a year by switching to another provider. So I'll explain the very simple logic behind switching to another provider, and how you can calculate yourself the savings that you can get very simply using the Excel file that I have built. Again, it doesn't take long. It takes about 20 or 30 minutes maximum after seeing this video for you to switch this. So let's get on to it. So first of all, how are we able to switch energy companies in UK? How are we able to switch the tariffs in UK? Because in some countries like India, for example, you are only fixed to one provider, because there's only one provider, state provider. And even in some other countries, there's only one provider, one company that you can have a tie-up with. But in UK, all of the network and transmission, all of that equipment is owned by a company called National Grid. And in Scotland, obviously, there's another company, Scottish Power. Both of them own it. But in essence, National Grid owns the transmission capabilities and across the country. And any company has to go through them. So if you have a problem, you will actually call National Grid. So National Grid owns all the equipment, and there's no specific equipment to the end user that these energy companies have to connect with. So what happens is, any energy producer in the country is able to have a tie-up with National Grid, and thereby they are able to offer a contract with the end customer. So they are able to offer the contract with the end customer, and they can actually be the supply provider for you, even though the transmission network is still coming through National Grid. And there were only 6 energy producing companies till about 2004. They were called the Big Six: Scottish Power, British Gas, E.ON, SSE, EDF, and Npower. If you have lived in the UK, you would have probably heard about all 6 of them. These are called as the Big Six, and they were the only energy producing companies till about 15-16 years back. Then a lot of smaller companies started producing energy, and today in 2020, there are over 60 companies, 60 different energy providers other than the Big Six who are producing energy and who are able to offer an end customer contract. And Big Six still own about 70% of the companies, which means not many people have known about these smaller companies and switching to it. But definitely, there's a lot of switching that is happening, which is why you see these other smaller companies being able to offer a more attractive tariff and more cheaper tariff as well, because their operating costs are much lesser. They are getting their energy from renewables specifically. So before we get into the calculation of the bill, there's one key element that we need to understand. The amount is calculated based on a unit of measure for electricity and gas called as the kilowatt hour. The kilowatt hour is the unit of measure used to calculate the pricing. The tariff is based on the kilowatt hour. Electricity is mostly straightforward. The meter reading that you get is already in kilowatt hour, which means that if you take 1 meter reading last week and 1 meter reading this week and subtract it, you already get your measurement in kilowatt hour. Gas reading is a little bit difficult, especially because the gas reading is in volume. It's the volume of gas that you have used. and it is also compounded by the fact that there is a metric meter which is in cubic meters, and there is a imperial meter which is in cubic feet. So that's slightly confusing in terms of how the meter reading can be converted into kilowatt hour. So if it is already in metric gas meter, the cubic meters, then you don't need a cubic feet to cubic meter multiplier, but you need to do a volume correction multiplying by 1.02, calorific conversion multiplying by 40, and then you divide it by 3.6 to get the kilowatt hour. Simply put, if you have a metric gas meter, you multiply it by 11.36 and you get your kilowatt hour. If you have an imperial gas meter, first you need to convert the cubic feet to cubic meter, which means you multiply by 2.83, then follow the same steps. Again, simple calculation is 32.15. You multiply it by 32.15 for a cubic meter or a cubic feet imperial gas meter, and you get your kilowatt hour. It's a very simple calculation. You don't need to understand it, just need to summarize, memorize the last two numbers and understand whether you're on a cubic meter, a metric meter, or whether you're on an imperial meter. Again, I'll share this Excel file with you, and you don't need to memorize these numbers as well. Now, how do you identify whether you are on a metric gas meter or an imperial gas meter? If you look at your gas meter, if it has 5 digits and 3 digits in red, that means you're already on a metric meter. You don't need to convert cubic feet to cubic meter. If you have a 4-digit number and a 2-digit number in red, that means you're on an imperial meter, which means you are on a cubic feet measurement. So that's how you will calculate, and I've given an example as to how you will calculate how you convert your meter reading into a kilowatt hour. Again, like I said, simplest way is to multiply by 11.36 or by 32.15 depending on what your meter is. Now this is an Excel, one look at it, you might think it is complex. I'll simplify it very, very easily. So all I've done is basically I've taken 2 dates. Essentially, it is important to take 2 meter readings at least a year apart. The reason being, if you take it only during the winter months, the consumption will be higher. If you take it only during the summer months, the consumption will be lower, which means that you will not get a proper average. So for this to work, you need at least a full year's worth of meter reading. Then you have an average of what your consumption is for that year. So I've taken a meter reading in May last year, and then again in 9th of June this year. That my difference is about 1030, and I converted using the 32.15 multiplier. So I get about 33,000 kilowatt hour. Same thing if I do with my electricity meter reading, I get about 4064 kilowatt hour. Now this is across 382 days. Difference between these two dates is 382 days, which means my average per day usage in kilowatt hour. Again, one thing to note is my consumption seems to be above average. One of the comments also pointed out in my Tamil video that it is a little bit above average. So the maximum average, or rather for a 4-bedroom house, well insulated house, it should be around 16 to 20,000 kilowatt hour. This is well above average, and again there could be varying number of factors depending on the number of showers, depending upon the hot water usage, depending upon the insulation of the house. There's so many other things. So this is definitely above average. And another reason, if you think your consumption is above average, get a smart meter also installed, which I'm yet to do. But smart meter is something that tells you on a daily basis what your consumption is. So once you've calculated this, you can also install a smart meter, check whether your daily consumption is still going accurately as per your average calculations or not. Or you can also see which days you're spending more, which days you're spending less, so you know which of the devices are consuming more power. So that by this we are getting to a point where we have our daily consumption, we have our yearly consumption. The reason why we do this is the most accurate way of telling or comparing the tariffs to see whether you're on the right tariff or not. Reason being, you can do this without this also. You can say that, I know only the amount that I'm spending, and the energy companies will then give you a comparison or tariff comparison, which is an assumption based comparison, and it may not always be accurate, which means that you will not know whether you're getting the full savings or not. So it is essential to get your kilowatt hour consumption. So what I did was, I'm using Scottish Power. I am on Scottish Power right now. I took their tariff, which is mentioned on your bill also. If you take any bill, you will also be able to see it. Even the gas conversion calculation is mentioned on your bill. If you just take a look at it, you will know whether you're on imperial meter or a metric meter. So the Scottish Power, the usage tariff is that for every kilowatt hour, they're charging me 3.63 pence. This is not in pounds, this is in pence. I'm clarifying it. And then there is a daily standing charge. Most energy companies give you a daily standing charge, which means that regardless of whether I use gas or not, I pay 27 pence every day, which means 10 days I pay 2.7 pounds. In 100 days, I end up paying 27 pounds, even if I switched off the entire gas usage in my house. Similarly, for electricity, it's 17.5 per kilowatt hour, and then there is a 23 pence standing charge. So put together 100 days, if I don't use any gas or electricity, I'll pay 27 pounds for my gas, 23 pounds for my electricity, which means 50 pounds in 100 days just for having the connection, not having used it at all, which is called as standing charge, and most companies do that. So these two will give you your calculation as to how much your per day cost is. So if I use 86 kilowatt hour per day, multiplied by 3.63, which gives me my kilowatt hour cost, and then I add my daily charge to it, which means I get about 3.4 pounds per day for my gas usage. And same way, if I do it for my electricity, I get about 2 pounds for my gas usage. Multiplied by the 365 days, then this is an average. So you'll get your yearly cost for your gas, yearly cost for your electricity, which means that I'm spending close to about 2,000 pounds, which roughly translates to the 150, 160 pounds that I'm paying for gas and electricity per month. So what I did was, obviously the other tariffs that I got was from a comparison website, but I took the tariff and put it into this Excel sheet, so I know what they're telling me is true, and I can also do a sample comparison, which is easier for me to check against my current tariff and check a few other companies as well. So I took the per kilowatt hour and the daily charge for Igloo, Tonic and EDF, which were the top 3 in my comparison. People had mentioned about Bulb and Octopus, which are 2 renewable energy companies which are coming up new, actually smaller companies but coming up new. They're not probably on many comparison sites, so you can also actually go and directly check out Bulb and Octopus. So for me, the company called Igloo, which I had never heard about, so they were offering me the cheapest tariff, and whatever permutation combinations I choose, they seem to be offering me the cheapest tariff in terms of the other providers and in terms of the Scottish Power. So a total cost comparison for yearly cost comes to around 1,350, which is around roughly 660 pounds cheaper than my current tariff with Scottish Power. So it was a no-brainer for me. I immediately decided to change, and changing this is very simple. I'll show you how. So first rule of thumb, like I said in my cost saving tips, is always go through a cashback website for anything in this country. Quidco is the one that I use because it's very, very reliable. For me, at least, it's worked really well. There are other cashback websites like Top Cashback, but Quidco is the one that I would recommend. And in 13 years, even the 1 pound, 2 pounds, sometimes we don't realize the importance of 1 pound, 2 pound cashbacks, but it all builds up. Every drop counts. And in the last 13 years, if you see, I've earned a total cashback of around 3,000 pounds. And that is how it builds up. You don't even realize that it builds up. Sometimes when you start, it could be only 10 or 15 pounds in a year. But then when you start switching these providers is when you actually make up a lot of money. So everything that you do in this country, buying a ticket, buying a flight ticket, to booking a cinema ticket, to getting your deliveries done, grocery deliveries done, to getting energy providers changed, insurance providers changed, mobile providers changed, telecom providers changed. Everything, if you go through Quidco, you will end up getting a lot of cashback over a period of time, and this is how much I have got, and just wanted to mention that. So again, I'm going to use Quidco for doing a comparison of gas and electricity suppliers. You can do anything. You can do U-Switch, you can do a lot of comparison websites out there, but Quidco obviously gives you probably the best cashback that I have seen in most cases, which is why I use it. And I'm going to give you a link for it. And full disclosure, the Quidco link that I'm giving is a referral link, so you don't have to use it. You can go to directly Quidco and sign up with it. So when I click on the gas and energy usage, so apart from the savings, I'm also going to get a 40 pound cashback by switching using Quidco, which is why I'm using Quidco. So they're asking me whether I want to switch just the electricity or gas or both dual fuel. Obviously, I have dual fuel. Some people don't have gas; they only have an electric connection in the house. So you can appropriately choose that. I'm going to get a code for my dual fuel. So it's going to ask me very simple questions, specifically, what is your current supplier? So I know what my current supplier is. Like I said, my current supplier is Scottish Energy. I'm going to select Scottish Power, and I'm on the standard tariff. And I pay by monthly direct debit. I don't have an economy 7 meter, and I know this is what is important. So you can specify that how much I spend in pounds. Then they're going to extrapolate that information and try and identify how much kilowatt hour you're going to spend. Otherwise, you can directly say that how much kilowatt hour that you are using, and that will basically be the most accurate form. So I know my electricity consumption is 3883, which I'm going to put here. So gas also, I know how much I'm consuming per month. I'm going to use the same thing. I know how much I consume, 31647 kilowatt hour per year. I'm going to enter my address and I'm going to click on continue. When I click on compare now, it is going to give me all the codes, and this is the comparison that I had shown in that Excel, which when you see it online on a comparison website, you don't understand how that comparison is, and I've basically simplified that comparison using that Excel, which I'll share with you guys. So this is the Igloo tonic, and I also compared it with the EDF Energy, which was one of the big six for a sample. But obviously there's another provider which is providing me even cheaper as well. I mean, cheaper than EDF. So if I click on the more info here, it is going to give me the same details. Basically, it's giving me the per kilowatt hour rate of this tariff for Igloo and per kilowatt hour rate of Scottish Power, which you can see on your bill as well. So this is a bit difficult to read in terms of what Igloo is offering and what Tonic is offering and what the other ones are offering, which is what I've done in my Excel, simplifying it and comparing it. And I've taken these numbers and put it into the Excel. So I didn't do a separate research to find out about Igloo and put it into the Excel. But this is basically how easy it is. You don't even need to go into the Excel. So you know how much you're saving, and this is very accurate based on your kilowatt hour consumption. So if you click on proceed online, they will take care of everything basically. They will contact your existing electricity and gas provider and they'll switch for you. You don't have to do anything about it. Also, if you're living in a rented apartment, a lot of people ask me, can I switch? If you are paying the bills, if you are responsible for paying the bills, you are welcome to switch to another provider because you're not actually changing any of the equipment in the house. All you're doing is like your broadband, right? You can choose who you want to sign up with. Like your mobile, you can choose who you want to sign up with. So just because you are in someone else's house, you're not changing any of the equipment in the house. All you're doing is you're choosing who you want to pay the bills with. So you are free to choose who you want to pay the bills with if you're in a rented house where you own the ownership for the bills. But in some houses, they have this concept called bills included, which means the owner will pay the bills and they'll charge you in the rent. In that case, you're not able to change it. But even then, you can actually tell your owner, if you find a cheaper tariff, you can always tell him that, can we switch to a cheaper tariff? If they're packaging it in the rent and including it for you and you find it's a bit costlier or expensive, you can always tell the owner. But even a rented house, you don't need to own your house, you can still go ahead and do it. So again, like I said, it hardly takes about 15 or 20 minutes if you do proper research, and it's just a click of a button, everything is taken care of you. You don't need to worry about even talking to anybody on the phone. You don't need to worry about calling up your existing supplier and negotiating or anything like that with this. It's a simple click of the button. A lot of people, more than 50% of the people don't switch in their lifetime, and they are losing out on a lot of money and they're losing out on a lot of savings. And if you know people who live in UK, you can actually share this video with them. If this was useful to you, please do share your comments. Again, I'm not recommending anyone. I'm not recommending Igloo or any of the energy providers. I don't have anything against any of the energy providers like Octopus or Bulb or anyone. If you find it cheaper, go with the cheapest option. Obviously, any option that you find cheaper is going to be good for you. So hopefully this video was useful. Until next time, see you then. Bye. Like I mentioned in my Tamil video, a lot of comments had suggested Bulb and Octopus because they are heavily advertised. Bulb and Octopus, you see a lot of advertisement these days. So I did go to Bulb and to Octopus and I verified their tariff. I compared their tariff, got a quote from both Bulb and Octopus Energy, and I put it into my Excel just for a comparison perspective because they're not giving you a direct comparison. They're only giving you a comparison with your existing provider. So they are definitely cheaper than my existing provider, but they are not cheaper than Igloo Tonic or the comparison options that I got. In fact, they're almost like 300 pounds more expensive than the options that I got in the comparison website. But people know about Bulb and Octopus because they are heavily advertised. And the other smaller companies which do not advertise actually give you all that savings because they're not spending on advertising costs or they're not spending on any of these marketing costs.